Hello and welcome to What It Takes. I'm Tom Landon. It's a pretty safe bet that every one of us has either been touched by cancer or will be in our lifetime. And that's why I'm so happy to be joined by a woman who has taken her experience with the disease and turned it into her life's work, though perhaps not in a direction even she expected. MaLora Bush is currently a radiation therapist and medical dosimetrist at the Animal Cancer Care and Research Center in Roanoke, which is a compassionate care hospital and research arm of the Virginia-Maryland College of Veterinary Medicine, housed at the Virginia Tech-affiliated Fralin Biomedical Research Institute in Roanoke. And MaLora, I'm just so glad to have you here. One of the nice things about being the host of a show like this is just getting to meet interesting people with good stories, and I think you're that. So let's just get to know you a little bit. You know, kind of where did you grow up, and talk about your schooling, and you know, kind of what led you to where you are.
Okay. Well, I was born in Southwest Virginia in a little town called Pound, Virginia. If you're from there, you call it the Pound. So that's how you can distinguish between someone who's from that part of the state.
That's good to know as I travel Southwest Virginia.
Yes.
It's always good to have a little inside
yeah,
information.
So the Pound. And then when I was young, my parents divorced and we moved to the Roanoke area. We moved a lot, about every 2 years, and then landed in Salem, and I ended up going to high school there and graduating from Salem, and then went to King College for a little while, and
Bristol?
In Bristol, and did not finish, got homesick, came back, got married, and had kids.
This place has a way of doing that, right?
It does,
And it
does.
keeps pulling you back as you try to leave. I know you said your parents divorced, but you know, one of the things we're going to talk about is sort of your approach to education and learning that's gotten you where you are. And just, you know, are there things you learned from your parents or family or extended family about learning that you feel like you've carried with you?
So, and yeah, my mom was a huge supporter and very much encouraging. No matter what I wanted to do, she encouraged it. And in her mind, for her, there wasn't anything that she couldn't do. And so her ability and her confidence in herself and what she could do is something that to this day I carry with me.
Yeah, that's important. I always like to ask this question too. Were there teachers, you sound like you moved around, went to a lot of different schools. Are there any teachers that stick out in your mind as who either encouraged you or taught you how you didn't want to learn?
I actually had some really good teachers. My fourth grade teacher, Miss Neighbors at Masons Cove Elementary School, was one of those teachers. Carolyn Newell, who was a history teacher at Salem, was probably the most influential, and I still see her occasionally, and it's like all this time hasn't passed when I see her in the grocery store. So those were my two biggest.
And that is the nice thing also about being in one place for a long time, is that you do run into your teachers in the grocery store, right?
Yep.
You didn't start out, well actually you did start out doing something in kind of the medical area, right? You were
did a lot.
Right, so let's talk about kind of your professional.
So I actually went to college because I thought I wanted to be an attorney. And realized after my first year of college and just some of the classes I was taking, like, yeah, this isn't what I wanted to do. And so I came back, I actually took a job as a case manager for Blue Ridge Community Services then. And I was a case manager at an intermediate training facility where we actually trained adults with developmental disabilities on how to function in everyday life, whether it be how to bathe themselves or how to pay for something at the grocery store. And that was really my first job kind of in that environment.
And then you jumped into retail for a while?
Well, I was a CNA also, so I got my certification as a nursing assistant. And then I stayed home for a little bit with my children.
Sure.
And I realized that I needed a little bit more. So I loved being at home, but I also needed more. And I felt guilty about that for a while. Because as a mom, you're supposed to want to be there all the time. And I really needed a little bit more. And so I went and got a job as a cashier at Food Line so I could talk to adults.
Right.
And, you know.
I bet you are a lot of people's favorite cashier, right? There, we all have one or two
Yes.
at our favorite grocery
Yes.
store where
Yeah.
we like to get in there.
Yeah, well, they were real excited because I was ready to talk because, you know, I'd been talking to 2-year-olds all day, so.
Right, right. How old are your kids now?
So now they're 25, 26, and 30.
That's great. Are they local or have they?
So my boys are. I have two boys that are here, and my daughter is in Portland, Maine. She went to college at Lynchburg College and fell in love and has moved to Maine and loves it.
So to bring you a little bit more to what you're doing now and still sticking with your personal story, your family, your life has been touched a lot by cancer, right? So
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
And even more, the first encounter I had with someone with cancer, I was actually 12 years old. It was my first job. I was a babysitter, and he was 8. And he had been diagnosed with leukemia when he was 3 years old. And I was his babysitter for 4 years. And I was 16 and he was 12. And at 12, he made the decision to stop treatment. He had been through radiation and treatment multiple times and was just ready to stop. And so he was the first person that really touched me as far as cancer is concerned. I had a dear friend when I was in high school that was 18 that was also diagnosed with leukemia. She traveled across country with her mom to receive a bone marrow transplant and came back years later. Doing good now, but you know. And then after that, my dad was diagnosed with lung cancer. My first husband, glioblastoma, and he was 42. My grandmother had kidney cancer and colon cancer, and then my mom pancreatic.
Wow, that's a lot to take on starting at a very young age, right?
Yeah.
And so also you've had an interesting seat to see how treatments and things have changed over the years, right?
Yes, I have.
Because, you know, cancer when we were children was, well,
Right.
how long do I have to live? And now it's
Right.
how
Right,
do
and
I-
leukemia has, the advancements made with chemotherapy, immunotherapy, and just advancements with treatment for leukemia, it's come a long way.
I want you to talk a little bit about Dr. Hormel, which was one of your bosses, right? And how
was.
that kind of changed the direction of your life.
So when my first husband was battling GBM, I worked for a grocery store, and they restructured. And I had been there for quite some time, and during his illness, and when I lost my job. And wasn't really sure what I was going to do because I had been on several interviews. And when you tell someone that, okay, I need a full-time job, but I also need you to know that at some point I'm going to need time off because of hospice. I'm going to need time off to go to UVA because David had appointments with neuro-oncology there. If he has a seizure and I get a phone call, I'm going to have to be able to leave. And I will tell you that when you tell retailers that, you don't get a phone call back. Right. And so when I went for the interview with Valley Neurology, which was Dr. Hormel's practice, they saw something in that, and that is the reason I got the job, because he felt like if I cared that much and I was that honest, then I would give his patients that same care.
And from that, your professional direction changed. Tell me about what schooling you did first, you know, when you realized that you wanted to do more than what you were doing there.
So when David passed away, I had promised him that what he had gone through and what we had gone through wouldn't be for nothing. And so I opened the book at Virginia Western and I thumbed through their catalog, and I selected the only curriculum that had the word oncology in it. And so at that point I enrolled in the radiation oncology therapy program at Virginia Western, and here I am today.
How long ago was that?
So that I enrolled in 2015.
So fairly recent, you know.
I had been to Western several times. I went for an accounting degree, and then I realized that wasn't for me, because I will tell you, it's all about trial and error. If you're fortunate enough to find your career the first go around, you're lucky. But I hadn't found anything I had passion about until I found the world of oncology.
And you were you were doing a clinical rotation at Lewis Gale while your mom was a patient there, is that right?
So during my rotation at Lewis Gale, my mom had not felt well for a while, and she had broke a rib stepping off an escalator, and red flags went up, and I was like, Mom, something's not right. You know, to me, I'm thinking that's metastatic bone, because how do you break a rib? But again, I'm also still a therapy student and thinking, well, am I accurate in that? And so I was talking with some therapists, and I said, okay, let me ask your opinion. And they went to the same place that I did. And so she called me that day, and she was in tears, and I said, hang on, I'm coming to get you. And it was a month before my graduation to be a therapist. I went and picked her up. We went to Lewis Gale, and I kind of knew just by the tone in the room that something wasn't right. And so she was diagnosed with metastatic pancreatic cancer that day. I'll never forget the words, because they said on her liver, following an ultrasound, lesions too numerous to count.
Wow.
And so that sticks with you. And so she was admitted that day, and so I never left while she was there. So I would sleep in her room in 2 chairs pushed together at night, and then I would go downstairs to the oncology center and finish my rotation. I did that for 10 days.
Wow, wow. And so now you're a radiation therapist and medical dosimetrist. That was the first time I'd ever seen that word, was when I was writing it out in my script.
Yep.
What is a dosimetrist?
So, and you are not the only one. Generally, when I say that I have my degree in medical dosimetry, people nod and smile, and I go, you have no idea what that is, and they go, no, I really don't.
Well, here's a chance for all of us to learn that new word, crossword word, right?
So a medical dosimetrist is a person who is responsible for creating the treatment plan for someone who's going to receive radiation. So you have a radiation oncologist, which is your doctor. They prescribe a dose of radiation just like if you were getting a prescription for any other drug. And so based on that prescription and how it's supposed to be planned, then a dosimetrist is the person that actually does the planning. Now what that entails is you take slice by slice images of a CT scan. So every slice, so if you have a CT scan and let's say there's 600 slices and you're going to treat a certain anatomy or body part or tumor, each one of those slices has to be contoured, so you outline every organ that's in each one of those slices to use, and then that's how we create a plan with a computer system.
It's all about targeting the dosage to the right.
So the
also,
goal,
it's not just the amount of the dose, it's where it's going.
right, so the goal, and with advancements, and that's the one thing as far as radiation is concerned, it has come a long way, and still today there's a lack of knowledge in the advancement that's been made in radiation. A lot of people still say, well, it's going to burn me up, or you know, and they believe that, or you know, is my skin going to be on fire, you know, because they don't understand the advancements that have been made. And so now we are really good with our technology and our treatment planning systems that we can target the tumor, and the goal is to treat the tumor to that dose that we want and then limit the dose to the organs around it. So treat the target and spare everything else.
That's great. And what we haven't talked about yet is that you're doing this now not on humans,
Yep.
but animals. Tell me about your work at the Animal Cancer Care and Research Center and how that happened. Like I don't think there's a lot of people who start, I may be wrong, but who start in human medical care and make the jump to animals.
No, probably not too many. And it actually all came about just pure luck, I guess. I do think we all have a journey, and so for whatever reason, this has been mine. I knew that the Animal Cancer Care Center was coming to this area when I was in Harrisonburg. And I knew that because the physicist that was my physics instructor at Virginia Western was going to be part of the shielding design for that facility. There's a lot of physics and a lot of specification in the design of the vaults that we treat in because of the dose of radiation that's being delivered. And so I was really curious as to what radiation for animals would be. And I had seen that they were going to need a therapist, but I was still in Harrisonburg, really didn't think nothing of it. Came back, they had already hired a therapist because I had inquired, and was working as a clinical instructor for Virginia Western. And the director of the radiation therapy program there called me and said, hey, one of the radiation oncologists at the Animal Cancer Care Center reached out and they're looking for a locum therapist. And she said, I instantly thought about you. Is this something you wanted to do? And I was like, well, yeah, I would love to talk to him. Now, mind you, I was also working as a PRN therapist in Lynchburg at this time. So I had therapy and clinical instruction going on. But I met with the radiation oncologist and went and did a shadow. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And so started locumum. My second assignment, the therapist that was there said, do you think you'd want to do this full time? And I was like, I don't know, why are you asking? She goes, I'm putting in my 2-week notice. And I was like, okay. And so that's how it all started.
So a lot of it is right place, right time, being open to
new experiences,
a new idea, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's guided you a lot.
A lot, yeah.
So are there differences medically in animal cancers and human cancers?
Not really. So cancer is cancer. And we see a lot of the same cancers in animals that we see in people. If you think about, what affects cancer and what can influence cancer as far as environmental, our animals go through the exact same thing we go through. So we see lung cancer in our animals, we see prostate cancer in our animals, we see breast cancer. So all those things that we see in people, we see in animals.
And does the research that's being done at the veterinary school, is this, obviously it's not a direct transfer, but I assume that you guys might be doing things that are even ahead of what is being done on humans?
So,
is that right?
So our goal, we are definitely translational. So what we are doing there, our hope is that it can translate back into the human world as far as advancement or technique or new technology. That is really what we're all about. Not only treating our animals, but what we're doing there to go back to treat people as well.
Yeah, and you have some animals, right?
I do, I have 3.
Tell me about your animals.
So I have 3 dogs. I have a 16-year-old toy poodle. His name is Stinky. He is, if you've ever seen Jeff Dunham, the ventriloquist, his puppet character Walter is Stinky. He is 16, he is old, he's a curmudgeon, but he loves me. And then I have Molly, and Molly is a 4-year-old 95-pound straight-haired Labradoodle that is just laid back, chill, relaxed, easygoing, not a care in the world. And then my baby is Ruby May, and I got her for myself for my 50th birthday, and she's a golden retriever, and I adore them.
They have a special place. What is different about when you're doing your work with animals, what's different about it? Just sort of like the mechanics of it. How is it different to treat
So in
a dog?
people, they are not anesthetized. People come in, so if you think about patients that are treated at a cancer center, generally as a therapist, you're going to treat 30, sometimes 40 patients a day. And those patients have about a 15-minute time slot, and they come in, you set them up, you treat, you image, you treat, and they go home. In the veterinary world, it's not that simple. And I say simple because the most important thing about treatment with radiation is that your patient be still, because we're targeting a specific area, and any movement in any direction can affect whether or not that dose is going where we want it to. So in our animals, we can't tell them just to be still, because they're not going to listen.
Right.
And if we put them on a table and we raise them 6 feet in the air, they're not going to be happy about it. So our patients have to be anesthetized. And so that process takes a lot longer. And then they have to be recovered. So they are put to sleep for every treatment.
And in the article that I read that was written by Kevin Myatt, who works for the college, that works for the center there, the veterinary school, one of the things that you said that intrigued me is sort of the difference also in the knowledge of a human being treated that they have potentially a very deadly disease versus an animal who.
Yes, and I explained to Kevin, I said, you know, this is nothing scientific, this is all experience. When my mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, the moment she heard the word pancreatic cancer, for one, she knew what that meant because it is a terminal illness. She changed, her voice changed, her mannerisms changed. She was not the same person coming out of that hospital as she was when she went in. And that occurred, she fought 7 months and she was not the same person for those 7 months. In our animals, they don't know the word cancer. They don't know what that means, you know. So they come in wagging their tail, they leave wagging their tail. They just know they've been there. They don't know that they have cancer.
They probably get a treat when they're there and then they get put out to sleep, so.
Yeah.
And it is, I mean, obviously we're aware of our mortality. Mm-hmm. They might be too, but in a completely,
right.
in a completely different way. It sounds like, I mean, I don't know how to say this quite, but you know, in the veterinary animal world, you know, you're on this cutting edge. You're working with really advanced equipment. I'd like you to talk about sort of the resources that the school has. But also that it's like kind of like a different barrier to entry, that you could kind of go there from the community college and teaching and all of a sudden be at the very kind of at the pinnacle of this kind of research. What's it like to work in a very state-of-the-art environment with, I'm sure, very smart people?
So I would say it's inspiring for me. I am back in school, so I'm pursuing my doctorate in health sciences, and I will say I'm the only veterinary interest in my class. Everyone else is from human medicine. I'm the only one coming from the veterinary field. And it's, you know, we have doctors, our medical oncologist, our radiation oncologist, they are working really hard with the new technologies to find new ways of treating cancer for both animals and for people. Mm-hmm. And so being inspired there, it's not ever that, why would you do that? It's like, oh man, you need to go do that. Like, that's awesome. And I love that. I love that. I would have never thought I would like research, but when you're sitting in a room of minds that are just spinning and there's conversation about, well, what if we did this, or what if we did that, or why does that act that way? You can't help but get excited about it. And so I do love that. And
I want to, what you said about being the only animal person in those rooms, as an educator, as a learner, as somebody who's been in all kinds of different classrooms, how does that kind of change the tone of the room, having somebody there with an experience that's very different than what your classmates experience? And are your classmates generally a lot younger than you or not?
Most of the time they are, I'm not gonna lie, and I am usually known as Mama MaLora because I am usually the oldest person. And so people are very intrigued by someone working in veterinary healthcare, because, especially from human medicine, because they don't have any knowledge or how that works. And so I get asked a lot of questions like, what's the difference between this, or what's the difference between that? So I get a lot of questions.
The decision to go back for a doctorate.
That was easy.
Walk me through that a little bit. How did you decide that that was something you wanted to do?
One, I'm really interested in research, and so I hope to one day maybe have my own research. And I work with a lot of doctors, and so I was like, okay, I've been out of school for 7 months, probably 2. I may be a little obsessed with education, and I think sometimes you are just a lifelong learner. And I really missed school when I wasn't there. So that was a big part of it. And then just, you know, being able to continue to grow and advance, and the sky's the limit, I think.
I mean, I know nobody wants to be told, oh, you're such an inspiration, but it is like, there are people watching this at home who maybe aren't happy in their work, or, you know, they loved school, but they just feel like that's past them. How, what do you have to say to people when, if they complain about their work, or if they say, oh, I just can't go back to school, that's too much? What do you?
So first of all, I'm going to say life's too short. You know, if you want to do something, go for it. And was going back to school easy? I'm not going to say that it was, because it wasn't, because you have to reacclimate yourself to dedicating that time and setting that time aside. For me, the hardest part was learning how to use a scientific calculator. At my age, calculators, when I was in school, was bad. You never used them. That was cheating. And so when I went back to school and it was like, okay, here's your calculator, and then it had 1,000,000 buttons on it, that was probably one of the biggest challenges. But fortunately, I had some pretty up-to-date students with me that were really good about teaching me how to use that. Now, and I will say with COVID, online education and flexibility in adult learning is incredible.
It sounds like it, because it's making it possible
It
for
is
you
making
to
it
still work.
absolutely, because as an adult, I mean, I have bills and, you know, I have mortgage and I have things that have to be paid, and I can't not work.
Can't
and
stop and drive an hour to go to school.
Correct.
And I just have to say, that's all the time we have. And as this week's show comes to an end, I just want to thank MaLora Bush for carving out some time out of what is clearly a busy schedule to share her story. If you'd like to know more about the great work going on at the Virginia-Maryland College of Veterinary Medicine Center in Roanoke, you can visit their website at vetmed.vt.edu. For What It Takes, I'm Tom Landon.